as well. All right, let's get down to business this evening. Let's see what our first mystery is. Beautiful slide by Margaret. Oh, do we have?
And Brett.
And Brett, that's great. Miles, do we have a poll for this one?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so take a look at this picture. There's going to be a poll. It says, what animal did New Hampshire trade in 1969 to get the first wild turkeys back in the state since they had been extirpated in the early 1800s? All right, so here's our results. We have Fisher came in first, but close right up was none because we always had turkey, with followed up by smallmouth bass, then porcupine and red fox. And I will tell you the answer is indeed, you guys are so smart. And if you didn't get this, now you'll know, you'll find out about it. Fisher were traded. New Hampshire traded, this is kind of a fascinating story. They traded 25 Fisher to West Virginia. And we got 11 turkeys in 1969, and then we got 15 more in 1970. And the reason that we needed turkeys was that by the Revolutionary War, the turkey population had already been pretty much decimated across New Hampshire. And by 1854, the last turkey was actually killed not that far from here in Ware, New Hampshire. So we went about 121 years before there were turkey back in New Hampshire. And we had Fisher, and West Virginia wanted our Fisher, and they wanted our Fisher because Fisher are the known eaters of porcupine, and they were having a porcupine problem. So there was a trade that they thought if they could get the predator back to keep the porcupine in check, and we could get some turkeys because we had some good turkey habitat and people wanted to hunt turkeys, and turkeys might be an important asset on the landscape. We traded them. I'm sad to tell you that the first round of transplanting turkeys didn't work. They were released in Pawtuckaway State Park, which is like in Nottingham and Deerfield, and they didn't really take, and that had to do with a lack of kind of good habitat for them. There wasn't enough food. So there was another time that we got another bunch of turkeys, and I have to double check my notes on when that was because I have a lot of turkey. Oh, they were released in 1975. And this time we got our turkeys from kind of near New York State and Pennsylvania. Part of the problems with our West Virginia turkeys was they weren't kind of sturdy enough for our winters. So the thinking was if we could get turkeys that had harsher winters, they'd be more apt to survive. And in fact, that was true. And those turkeys were released in a different spot. They were released in the Connecticut River Valley in Walpole and Westmoreland. And after those turkeys really took, they were transplanted another 15 times across New Hampshire. And now we have over 25,000 turkeys. That's the estimate in New Hampshire. And they're located in every county in New Hampshire, including the North Country. I did see that there was a question if we knew that the Fisher thrived in West Virginia. Jim, that's such a good question. I'll have to double check. I'm not 100% sure of that answer. So you can check me next time we meet in December, and I'll see if I have done my research. I'll have to ask Need Cadeau. So that's the story of the turkeys, and you can read more about turkeys, or you can kind of read this information again by visiting our Nature's Calling blog site, which is on the Harris Center website. And there's a Turkey Triumph section on that, which talks about this for the month of November. So gobble, gobble. All right, let's see what's next. We might be in trouble because I think what's next. Oh boy. Oh, Phil's saying he heard that there's over 40,000 turkeys. Phil, before we move on to this mysterious thing over here.
That's all you, that mysterious thing.
What, you know it?
No, that's all you, I said.
Oh crap. Oh crud. It's not crap. I'm a poop expert. What is this? Phil, before we talk about this, can you tell us a little bit about turkeys on the landscape and what's important about them?
Yeah, just I think you covered it pretty well, but yeah, turkeys they feed a lot of larger predators. So Fisher in particular, bobcat, things that are a little more common now than probably were at that point when we were clearing a lot of fields in our landscape are now being well fed by turkeys. And maybe part of why we have so many bobcats today in this part of the state has to do with turkeys. So yeah, that's all I was going to mention about turkeys. But yeah, I've seen them way up on the Canada border. So they are present even in the middle of winter in the far northern landscapes.
That's great. That's really interesting. Yeah, I kind of remember when I first moved up here back in the 1990s, we didn't have as many turkey, and it was exciting to see them. And now I've actually been stuck in a turkey jam where like there's a bunch of turkey on the road and the traffic stops. I see some people nodding their heads. So yeah, it's fun.
Susie, didn't Ben Franklin want the turkey to be the national bird?
Yes, he did, which might have been more appropriate. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I guess people didn't think the turkey was that attractive, and that's why it didn't win. So we'll move on to this question, which is this slide right here, which has stumped us. It says, found on a moss-covered log in the woods of Vermont. What are they, and who might have collected them? So we were really hoping that John would be here this evening, and he's not. But is Pam here, who submitted this slide? I'm not seeing. Miles, do you see any Pams on our sign in?
Yes.
Pam, oh, hey, great. Awesome, Pam. We have a couple of questions for you about this. Did you like pick up one of these little things and handle it? Was it like a little nut? Was it a fungus? Can you describe what it might have felt like or looked like? Because we are not sure what this is. So we need some more info from you if you don't mind sharing. More like a bunch of bulbets. I have a theory. I had a theory about this then. Maybe I can ask Karen Seaver or Phil Brown or anybody who's more knowledgeable about plants. To me, when I saw this, I wondered if it wasn't wild garlic, like the bulbs and cloves of the wild garlic plant. Karen or Phil, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know the species. It's definitely a bulb of some kind. And Pam, do you know what season you took this picture? Was it fall or summer? Or... I'm not sure of the species, but I definitely think it looks like the cloves to me also that would like each one would break off and could form sort of its own individual plant is what it looks like to me. But
so,
I'm not.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I wondered about Dutchman britches. She's wondering if it's the kind of tuber or bulbs from the Dutchman breeches plant. Is that, Karen, do you know if that plant's in like the lily family or no? Maybe not.
I'm not sure. I would get. I'm not sure. I have to look that one up.
So because when I saw this, I thought, oh, those look like little wild garlic cloves. And I put that out. We go through the slides before we meet. So we try to be knowledgeable about what we're going to talk about. And other people thought maybe it was a fungus. But now that we have Pam confirming that they were kind of bulbs and Karen kind of looking at it, thinking the same thing, I'm thinking that it was a rodent who collected these tubers in this one particular spot. Because I wouldn't imagine that what's interesting is I would think they would want to bury them or stash them or cache them somewhere. But this is very rodent behavior of hoarding or stashing or collecting. Did you, Pam, did you notice if any of them had been chewed or nibbled on? Any of them kind of open? It almost looks like, can you guys see my pointer? Or Miles, can you point to the lower corner kind of down? Yeah, kind of looks over there. Did you notice if any of them had been chewed? She's Brett Thielen, Andrew. Brett, what are you posting there?
That's a link to a site I just found about Dutchman's breeches, and there's a picture of a bulb in there that looks doesn't look quite as dense as these, but it does look similar.
Yeah, So, I mean, that collecting of stuff is very rodenty. You can see it going on right now. They're really trying to stash up and collect as much kind of high calorie, high fat, high starchy foods. And the bulb or a tuber would be a perfect example of that. But it's just interesting that they were on the stump and a lot of them, and they weren't kind of stashed away. So I'm not 100% sure what rodent would do that. I mean, comes to mind a chipmunk, um, squirrel. Those are my two best thoughts. Does anybody, any of the other naturalists, have anything they might want to add to this? No, you're all leaving me out to dry out here. and the on this. Well, thanks, Pam. This was really cool. I'm going to look a little bit more into this, and I might send this picture on to my friend, Joe Merritt, who is a small mammals expert. Actually wrote a book called The Biology of Small Mammals, might be able to help figure this out. So that's pretty cool. Well, I'll give another report on this next time. You guys can quiz me. Oh gosh, I got test anxiety. All right, let's go. What's the next one? Phew. What is going on? This is from Eric. He says, I found this extensive pool of sap at the base of an apparently very healthy black cherry in my yard. The tree had no visible wounds, though I could see the sap bleeding from beneath multiple scales. Any thoughts? Signed, Eric. And this we're turning over to our buddy, Jeremy. What's up?
Eric, what are you doing sending something in like this? This is kind of kooky looking, isn't it? It's like, remember the slime in the Ghostbusters movies? I think your tree's been slimed. So you've been hearing some specters out in your yard at night?
It happened to several cherries. It wasn't just one.
Really?
Yeah.
Boy, it is a mystery. I mean, you can see that. I mean, there's a couple things that cause a tree like a cherry to sap out like this, and one of those is borers of some kind that are boring into the wood and the conductive tissue in the tree. But you'd see sawdust with that. Did you see any sawdust when you were looking at these?
No.
No. So the other thing is cherry is susceptible to some cankers, which are sort of dead ulcerations of cherry trees. And you'll notice this in the woods. If you see a cherry, it's pretty rare to see a completely clean bowl of the cherry, a completely clean stem. There's often a tumefaction, a tumor-like protuberance, or a ulcer somewhere on the stem in there. And those are caused by viruses. They're caused by bacteria, probably fungus as well. Actually, I'm sure fungus as well. And can be up higher in the tree, and then the sap can drip down from above. You can see in the first picture, the one of the stem itself, see how the leaves are stuck to the bark. So that suggests to me that there's sap all over the scales of the bark of this tree. So it's really flowing down the tree. Did you see any damage up above, like even higher than you might think to look?
I didn't. And I have to say, these are unusual cherries in that their canopy, they're proper, 40, 50 year more years old. They're very significant, like 24-inch DBH.
Wow.
And they're in great shape. They're not your typical. I understand what you're saying about the typical cankerous cherries. These are in great shape.
Well, I think my guess is that there's some kind of canker activity going up higher on the stem, and you're seeing this flowing down the stem and then puddling down below. What I think we should look for is next spring and into next summer. Let's see if there's some dead spots of tissue on the trunk that start to show up that would explain what this came from. I mean, the only other explanation that I can think of would be some kind of borer, but if there's no sawdust, that wouldn't be the case. Phil, do you have any ideas on this?
Jeremy, Karen has a theory.
Oh.
What about bacterial wetwood? I've seen that, it looks more like waxy rather than a clear slime, but that presents sometimes as just this ooze, and I've never seen it pool all that much. But I don't know. That was just kind of something I thought of when I looked at this.
So
How would we follow this tree to know that that was the case, Karen?
Well, I mean, what I know about microbial wetwood is that it's sometimes it's transient, like it doesn't present and then necessarily kill the tree. From what I've read about this, is there can be an infestation, and then the tree can kind of, through its growth methods, kind of block off the zone of the tree where it's infected. So what I don't know about the wetwood is how it gets there. Is it insect deposited or canker related, like you mentioned? I don't know about that, but I've seen this on a few tree, not exactly like this, but I've seen wetwood on some trees out in like off the Eastview Trail.
I have a question for you guys. And Eric, you said there was more than one tree that was exhibiting this.
yes,
So maybe this is for Jeremy and Karen. If it was something like a canker, is a canker, like, would you expect to see an outbreak of canker in a multiple of trees in an area? Because when I hear a bunch of trees having that, I think of more insect damage.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly connect it to insect damage, although the cankers are usually because of some some inoculation by a fungus or a bacteria by an insect. So it's usually a wound from something that allows for that vector to get in. So I don't know. I think this is a mystery. We're gonna have to wait until next spring and summer to see what's happening to those trees and the stems of them up above what we're seeing.
so let me ask you, if this particular tree in the photograph is 60, 70 feet high, and like I said, it's 24 dBH, it's growing beside my wife's studio. Should I be concerned?
Not yet. I mean,
Okay.
yes, I'd be concerned and I'd follow what's happening with it, but I wouldn't assume that this is the end of the tree.
Okay.
There's always stories of people who move into a new house and cut down these conifers that have died next to their house, and it turns out that they were larches and they just dropped their needles. So you're not in any rush to do anything here, but just keep an eye on this tree in terms of what the bark looks like around branches up above and
Eric, I have a question for you. Did you notice, did it smell like black cherry, or did it have no odor, the goo?
No odor,
No
but I
odor.
could smell.
Interesting. Okay, wow. Well, that was fascinating. We were joking in the chat, in case you're not following along in the chat, that we might have to call this particular December Ask a Naturalist Stump a Naturalist, because there are some stumpers here, and without John, we have a mushroom stumper. So
I just add that this is an enormous amount of goo. Sometimes when you see things like this, usually it's just a little bit, but this is a real puddle at the base. It's very odd.
yeah, I mean, I know when I was living at an apple orchard and was looking out for borers, we would see goo, but it was never to this amount of goo. I mean, that would have to be like a massive borer infestation. Anyway,
One thing to think about is looking higher in the tree to see, are leaves stuck up higher on the stem?
I'll look for that tomorrow.
If they are, that means that the sap is flowing from a higher point, and
Okay.
maybe get some binoculars out and look to see if you can see some sort
Yeah,
of
I can check that tomorrow.
damage.
Thank
up
you.
there.
all right, Miles, let's move forward here. Well,
Did we skip this one?
no, I mean, maybe there's somebody in the audience that knows this. It says these mushrooms were on a birch in central Massachusetts. What type? And then it says the cavity in the tree was used by a small rodent as evidenced by scat and chewed acorns. So I can talk a little bit about the little scat and rodent chew up acorn pieces, but we usually have John here, and he's our mushroom expert. Wondering if there's anybody out in our Ask a Naturalist audience that has any knowledge of what these beautiful little mushrooms are. Then we will call them what people call little mushrooms that are this color when they don't know what they we'll call them the LBJs, the little brown jobs of the mushrooms. well, maybe we'll call them the little yellow jobs, but they're certainly beautiful. And Miles, maybe we'll put this back in for the December question and come back to it and make sure that John is here, or at least has given us an answer. But maybe before we go, we could just look at that little bit of feeding sign down in there where we have little bits of acorns kind of pulled apart and gnawed on. And we have a little bit of very rodent-ish scat. And Pam, I'm so glad you're here again, because I have another question for you. Can you tell me how high up on the birch tree this was? Was this higher than like your hip, or was it low to the ground? So we'll wait. Oh, Carl's saying this could be, is this the fungus golden foliota? We don't know. We will check. And eye level, 5 feet up. Okay, so I was asking her what height it was, because when I first look at it, it makes me think of chipmunk, because chipmunks are very, they eat their acorns kind of just open and they pull it into strips like that and then they nibble it. But 5 feet up would be too high for a little chipmunk. And chipmunks are very, very tidy. They're one of the tidy poopers in the animal kingdom. They don't typically do their business where they're feeding. So this is more mouse-like behavior. So I'm going to go for, this is a mouse, more of a mouse cache, just because it's higher up, it's 5 feet up, and the scat is mixed in with the food. So that's cool. So I'm seeing that some people here are finding, and Jenna, you saw it too, golden foliota. I'm wondering
Yeah, so let me just say a few things and
Yeah.
because I am not a fungus person at all, but I used my, one of the apps on my phone to scan this like you would if you were outside. And the very first thing it came up with was golden foliota. So I looked it up, and it's just so funny that I'm using technology on top of technology. And it says that it is particularly obvious in late summer and fall. Some books list it as edible. Other books do not, so don't eat it. And it says that it grows in clusters on live or dead trees.
Does it say if it's a birch? Sometimes it'll say if it has
It doesn't
a
on
preference.
this one, but I can keep looking.
The website I just linked to says it is found on birch, not
Oh,
exclusively.
great. We will not be stumped. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Everybody, like, put your thumb up, do your reaction sign if you agree this looks like a match. Let's take a look here. How are we doing?
Clustered on living trunks and logs of deciduous and coniferous trees, especially maple, elm, beech, and birch. Canada down to Tennessee, west to Washington.
Wow. Yeah, we could just tell John we don't need him anymore.
Yeah, we've replaced him with an app and Google.
This is the future of all of us. Jenna, can you talk for a minute about which app you were using? Were you using Seek?
I was using Seek. Yep, it has, it's made by A Naturalist, and it's free in the App Store. And it basically, you just hold your camera, you open the app and you hold your camera up to something, usually in nature. That's the whole idea, is you're outside and you hold it up to a flower, a blossom, an insect, and it'll give you options on what it might be. And this one didn't even give me options. It just jumped right to golden foliota. So I've never used it on my screen before.
Yeah, we all deserve, this is good. That was some good sleuthing. You tried to stump us, Pam, but we are coming through. All right, let's see what our next.
To know how Carl arrived at that answer as well.
I know, Carl. Carl? Wait, go. Let's check in with Carl. Would you like to share in the chat how you came up with that? I forgot you came up with that, and you might not have used an app. You might have had some experience. You can share in the chat how you came up with golden foliota, which is cool. And again, just for those wondering what the name of the app was or is, it's called Seek. It's in the chat, and it's oh, Carl used Seek too. Great minds think alike. So if you have a phone, Seek is a great tool. I use it as well when I'm out and stumped by something. So
did you mention what made the hole originally?
Oh, no, I didn't. Let's bring that over to Eric and Phil. Do you guys want to talk about what made that original hole that the golden foliota is growing in and the mouse was eating in?
I have a guess.
Yeah.
It's a soft species of tree in general. That's most likely a woodpecker cavity. It looks like it has chisel marks on the inner bark that you can see that were pecked. It probably may not have been a nest cavity, or it may have. It's a little bit hard to tell from that angle, but it looks like it tapers. So perhaps some sort of pit that the woodpecker was making in order to excavate carpenter ants. So, very likely a pileated woodpecker. How big was that hole? Any idea? I didn't catch that earlier. Was it like 2 inches long, maybe?
Pam's having to do a lot of work tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. We
Well,
really
most
appreciate
likely a
it.
woodpecker in my estimation. Pileated woodpecker size. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Pam. Thanks. And thanks, Phil. That was great. And great question, Jeremy. Thank you. And there was another person who asked the same question. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, Karen, this is exciting. Here we go. I picked up a donated ball-faced hornet's nest from Nicholas and Madeline Morris's front bushes in Peterborough. I saw some memes going around that these are the piñata of 2020, but this one is fully synceased. How do you say that word?
Nest.
The nest.
Nest.
It's a nest.
Meaning it's dead. It's done its cycle.
I'm like wicked stumped tonight. I can't even speak. What can you tell us about these nests, Karen? So let's turn this over to Jenna. What is going on with these nests? Tell us what you know.
So this particular one is a bald-faced hornet nest, and they will, starting way back last spring, a queen will have overwintered. She will mate in the fall, and she will spend the winter hibernating somewhere, maybe beneath the siding of their house. That looks like a good spot. And then she will come out and start building a nest. She'll get some wood pulp, maybe from your railing or your deck or a dead tree, and she will start building and laying eggs. And she then, over time, she won't have to build anymore. Her first batch of offspring will build, and then it will just build and build all summer. The offspring will help. It's almost all daughters, in fact, all daughters that will help her do this. She's laying all daughters at the beginning of the summer and mostly through the summer. And they will be the workers, and they're building, and they're inside. There are going to be cells that look a lot like inside of a honeybee nest, the same shape, but they're made of this papery material. And then through the summer, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the end of the season for them, the queen will die and all the workers will die. She will have laid some male eggs, and those will emerge out and go find other females to mate with from other hives. And the original queen, will also have laid some queen eggs. So those are offspring that are destined to be next year's queens. So everyone will vacate this nest in the fall, which is why Karen was able to hold it, because it was empty. And they will never come back to it. So once it is empty, then a lot of people will take them down and make interesting decorations out of them. And sometimes I have read that birds will use some of that papery stuff the next season for nest building. I don't know much about that, but maybe the bird people can say. But
well, yeah. A quick question that came up from Miles is he's wondering how you can tell that it was a bald-faced hornet's nest. Do different wasps build different shaped nests?
Yes. Well, paper wasps would build I actually don't know how to describe the difference. I'm sure someone out there has. When I see this, I immediately say bald-faced hornet, but I'm not sure why. It's one of those things that I just am sort of like, well, that's what that is. Paper wasp to me is almost more, I don't know, there's all these scallops on the outside, which says bald-faced hornet to me. Again, I don't know how to describe the difference, but paper wasps to me is a smoother outside, but I don't know if that's actually scientifically true or just something that I have observed and randomly think. Jeremy had a really big bald-faced hornet nest, I think so, in his yard like a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I wonder I'm pretty sure that was bald-faced hornet, Jeremy, wasn't it?
I think mine was, well, I'm not sure. Mine was grayer. It didn't
Oh,
have
was it? Well, that
quite-
really
quite as
depends
distinctive
only
like
on the type of tree they're getting the pulp from, sort of the type of wood. So it wouldn't necessarily mean species. But yeah, I wouldn't. A lot of people will ask if they should take these down in the summer, and I would say if it's in a place that's bothersome and dangerous, then yes. But otherwise, if it's way up high in a tree or something, I would just leave it until it dies naturally, until it empties. That is.
And
Naturally.
you did ask a really good question that I want to turn over to Eric and Phil is, are there birds that use the paper from the wasp nest for nesting?
So yeah, birds that line their nests could use it as a liner because it's very, it's not coarse or woody. And so for birds that like a lined nest, like some of the vireos, they could. I'm not aware of any particular species that uses it, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see it in certain species nests. Phil, do you have any further thoughts?
Yeah, the vireos. I think that's exactly what I've read. Is that red-eyed vireos in particular will use the linings in their nests, and it's thought that maybe they do that in order to deter potential predators, so to keep them away from raiding their nests.
So it's like a visual cue.
Mhm.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. Well, I know something neat about paper wasp nests is they think that this was the inspiration for how we invented paper or how paper was invented. And the story I read was that there was a kind of a monk in China who was out in the garden kind of meditating and looking around at the natural world. And he noticed that the wasps were feeding on the dead wood and mashing it up in their mouth, using their mandibles to mash it up, and then spitting it out and building this nest out of it. And so he took like wood pulp and banged it out and pressed it with water, and that was paper. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that story too, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And Jenna, when they make the nests are waterproof, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I actually watched some videos today of a bald-faced hornet on someone's railing, sort of scraping the wood pulp with their mandibles, which are the hard, really sclerotized part of their mouth parts, and then made a little ball, and then they sort of ingested it almost. So I wonder if it becomes waterproof partly through whatever they're adding to it in their saliva, because then it gets to its location and mixes basically like insect saliva, if there's such a thing, with the wood pulp.
Wow. I mean, it does make you think like if scientists could figure out how to replicate the waterproofing of paper, the way that the wasps were doing it, what the kind of implications for design could be. You can have waterproof building materials. I think that's kind of neat.
So Pat just wrote something interesting in here. Pat says, I examined the paper fibers of the bald-faced hornet nest and compared it to the paper in a yellow jacket nest, and they look quite different. The yellow jacket fibers were rounder, like tubes, but the bald-faced hornet paper was more like fine fibers. That is fascinating. So thank you for that, Pat.
That's so cool. Maybe it has to do with the way that it's chewed or processed.
Yeah.
Or the type of wood that they use. So cool. All right. I know we got sidetracked by the wasp nest, but I love this question. This is from Addie, who lives in Maine, and she's 8 years old. And Addie, if you're listening, or whoever sent this in, this is just such a good question for this time of the year. How can I stop birds from flying into my big window and getting hurt? So many of us are feeding the birds again and maybe are experiencing this. So Phil and Eric, do you have any tips for people to how to keep birds safe from flying into windows?
Eric, do you want to start with?
Well, I was talking to Phil about this earlier, and Phil actually has some more up-to-date information. So Phil, why don't you take this?
Okay. Yeah, so it's a really common problem, and it's not just during bird feeding season in winter, but especially during the migration season, we see a lot of window collisions, and our own house is guilty. We're guilty of having the same thing happen. Birds will not only get hurt, but a lot of them will die. In fact, about 1 billion birds per year. It's estimated that 1 billion birds perish at windows every year around the globe. So that's just a huge number. So what we can do to prevent that, and Addie and others who are listening, I would strongly recommend getting some bird tape for your windows. There's a special tape that is sold by a couple of organizations that are around to protect birds. The one that's really made it famous is the American Bird Conservancy, and it's just called bird tape. If you search American Bird Conservancy bird tape, that will pop up as one of the options. Yeah, thank you, Brett, for putting some of the glass solutions there. There are some other solutions that they recommend as well, because it's not on everybody's budget to go out and spend $100 on their windows, but it makes a big difference. It'll save birds' lives. It'll prevent birds from getting hurt. And what we know is a lot of these birds that actually hit the windows will eventually succumb to their injuries. So even if they do make it. So,
How much did one window cost, roughly speaking?
I think we covered one big bay window for about $30 or $40 recently. So we have a couple of really problem windows. Birds are being attracted to the light. They don't see glass as a barrier. They see reflection. So they're trying to fly through your house essentially by gliding because they see some light on the other side. So especially for areas where windows are opposite sides of your room, that's going to be an issue. So yeah, bird feeder season for sure. You want to keep your bird feeders further from the windows also as a solution to reduce collisions in bird feeding season. But this bird tape is, it definitely is something that you do see, but your eyes can get used to it. And one product that I'm very happy with comes in these long strips that you paste onto the outside of the window and simply peel them off like adhesive tape. It leaves little dots every 2 inches. And it kind of you get used to it. It's like you're looking through a screen. So it really hasn't reduced our aesthetic pleasure just watching outside the windows that way. So some good suggestions coming in on the chat too. So yeah, Carl, using window film, exactly, same kind of thing. You can even hang yarn from the windows so the birds have a visual barrier, but 2 inches, spacing of 2 inches seems to be the way to do the trick. The old way of doing it is all these silhouettes, raptor silhouettes, and that may work to some extent, but if birds find a hole in there that's narrower, they'll try to fly through it. So go with something that has as much coverage as possible to those windows.
I was just going to add something that Brett put in the chat. I have to say one other thing that I really like about Addie's question is she's showing her cat inside, and her house cat is, if you have a cat, I'm just going to put a plug in, keep your cat inside. Cats are responsible for killing 400 to 500 billion, that's what that be, billion wild animals in America alone a year. And out of that number, 4 to 5 million of those are songbirds. So keeping your cat inside is safer for the wildlife outside. It's also safer for your cat. So yay, this was there were lots of great suggestions in the chat. If you haven't taken a look at it, I really recommend looking at the chat for ideas to how to keep your windows safe.
Bill, could you just tape the cat to the window? Would that work?
Yeah.
I can add an anecdote. I had a tufted titmouse fly into, because I have the same problem. I had a tufted titmouse fly into a window last week, and it was very badly stunned on the ground. And I picked it up and I put it in a box, and it was almost dark. It was like half an hour before darkness. So I put it in a box, and it was too late, in my opinion, it was too late to release it back out. And so I kept it overnight. And at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock the next morning, I released it, and it was fighting fit. So that's a technique that many people use to allow birds to recover, keep them in a dark, ventilated spot, like a cardboard box, until they are recovered. Because if they're out in the wild, they're going to be easy prey for a hawk or a squirrel or whatnot.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. That's a good story. And it's actually, Whoa, well, let's check this out. Albino blue jay by Ben Halbrook took this picture. So this is an interesting sighting. How about Phil or Eric? Any thoughts on how often you'd see an albino blue jay? And if anybody out there wants to share, any of our naturalists want to share about albinoism and how often it is. So.
Well, it's not albinism per se. It's called, more
Oh.
technically referred to as leucism, because albinism is a complete absence of pigment, and this bird has carotenoids in some of the darker feathers.
Yeah.
Around the nape, there's sorry, not carotenoids, melanin in those darker nape feathers, and in the beak and in the eye. So it's leucistic, which is it's a pigmentation abnormality, like albinism, but different. And it's much more common to see this than it is a purely albino bird. Some species exhibit it more than others. Robins are quite, it's not unusual to see a robin with a white feather in a wing or a body feather. Sometimes it's rare to see it to this extent, and this, especially in blue jays. I'm not. And the other thing about blue jays is we think of a bird as being pigmented, but blue jays actually are not pigmented in the true sense of the word. The blue on a blue jay's feather is actually a refraction. It's a physical property of the feather that causes the light to be refracted with only the blue rays being emitted. So it's not actually a pigmentation that gives the blue jay its blue coloration. And one of the ways you can tell this is if you find a blue jay feather on the ground and you hold it up to the light, to the sky, it turns black. The blue disappears. Whereas if you were to hold up a cardinal feather, the red is still red, and so it's a physical property of the feather rather than a pigmentation. But that's pretty cool. I've never seen a leucistic blue jay like that. That's a pretty remarkable image.
That's great. And we'll have to put the word leucistic in next month's quiz, along with, what was the one I couldn't say, Karen? Senescence.
Senescence. Yep.
I'm gonna need somebody to say that one for me. That's a toughie for me. All right, let's move on to the next question. This is from Brett. A friend and I came across this blue jay kill site along the Harris Center's North Pond Trail on November 8th. After taking a closer look in and amongst the feathers, we even found the jay's bill and face, quote. I have found plenty of feather piles in the woods before, but never one that contained part of the animal's head. Any idea who the predator could have been? And I'm gonna put this up. This is who killed the blue jay. So here we go. Hawk, fox, owl, fisher, or Colonel Mustard in the library with a wrench. It looks as though the owl is winning at 42%, with hawk next at 33%, and then fox 17%, and fisher at 8%. Sadly, nobody voted for Colonel Mustard in the library with a wrench. Maybe it was Mrs. Plum with the candlestick. I'll just start off by saying, and I'll wait for Phil and Eric to chime in, but as the mammals person here, interested in mammals, this is not a mammal kill site when I look at it, because the feathers are removed, they're plucked off. So, and when I think of a mammal eating a bird, they're going to eat a lot of the bird and the feathers and not spend a lot of time plucking it. And so I'm eliminating the mammals from the selection, including Colonel Mustard. So Phil and Eric, what do you think? Hawk, owl, somebody else? What's your theories?
Well, I guess I'll take a guess that it might be an owl. It is kind of odd to see the head. The typical bird kill site is a pile of feathers, and sometimes the raptor, eats it right on site. Sometimes it can carry off the prey and fly up somewhere at a safe perch where it's not going to get harassed by crows or ravens or other birds, maybe, or mammals. But it looks like whatever it is went for the brains here. And it strikes me that that might be the tactic of an owl compared to that of a diurnal raptor. That's my guess.
Eric, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've heard anecdotally that even diurnal raptors will preferentially go for the brains and the eyes because that's where the good eating is. That's where the protein is. And I've heard of peregrines eating a bird's brain and eyes and leaving the rest. So I mean, the one thing that's clear from this is the very wide scattering of the feathers. And so if you've ever seen a bird of prey plucking a carcass, they'll pluck feathers and then they'll throw them off to the side. And that's even a bird that has altitude, or a bird that's got long legs and has an aspect to it, can do, you're going to get a wider scatter of feathers from a larger bird throwing them away than a smaller bird. So I given the habitat in the background, I wouldn't be surprised, just because blue jays are diurnal. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a Cooper's or a sharp-shinned hawk.
Wow, fascinating. Wow, that was really cool. Thanks, Brett, for sending that in. And what a find. And to find the head, I've never seen that either. Normally the head is as Phil and Eric mentioned, the first thing to get gone. So attached photo, one of a bear tree, bear marking this territory. Thanks, from John. So this I had to send off for a second opinion to Mead Cadeau, who is really taught me everything that I know about wild mammals. And he did not think that this was a bear marking. And bears often mark trees, but they don't really mark them like this. They'll more bite the tree, turn their head and bite the tree. And then there'll be more of a scratch marks and you'll see the claw marks. So this, he did not think this was a bear marking. He thought that this was a squirrel. And I was like, Mead, tell me why you think this is a squirrel. He said the squirrel is collecting the inner dry bark for his nest, for lining their winter nest with it. And so this tree looks like maybe it's dead. It looks a little punky. Jeremy, would you agree? It looks like it's not alive anymore. So it's not alive. So it's not after any of the inner bark for eating. It's more collecting this kind of pulpy material to line its nest, which would be in a cavity of a tree at this time of the year. When you see the squirrel nests, and now we can see them really well up in our trees, those are their drays for the summertime where they have their young. In the wintertime, they're in the cavity of a tree and they need a lot of insulation around them. And they're going to line that with things like the inner bark of dead trees and kind of this pulpy stuff. So that was Mead's theory. I wasn't 100% sure. It's also looks pretty high up. So yeah, it looks 10 feet up. If you maybe next month, we'll have some signs of bear markings on a tree so we can look at those. So Miles and Brett, if you can help me remember that in the next Ask a Naturalist, because this has been a question that's come up before. So I think it might be fun to just look. The winter time is a great time because there's a lot of openness in our woods where we can see what the trees look like. It's a great time to go looking for bear sign on trees and on telephone poles. So we'll give you sort of a guide to that next month. So I think we might be at the end of all of our questions for this Ask a Naturalist. We wanted to just take a moment and tell you that this time of the year, you don't have to go shopping anywhere except for the Harris Center. We have a lot of great materials that we're selling, from our 50th anniversary swag to some gift ideas. And one of our new and most favorite gift ideas is this incredible nature almanac and calendar put together by the wonderful Francie von Mertens, who's been a board member, consistent person on our committees, a writer of the Backyard Birding column for the Ledger for many years. And this is really a work of kind of love and beauty. And Miles, do you want to tell us a little bit about it? I will mention that it's a perpetual calendar, so it's undated. So this is a calendar that can last you a lifetime. It's filled with photographs and her wonderful writing. And Miles, how much are we selling this for?
They're $15, and yeah, each day has an image and a story to tell. They're really interesting. They can actually help with a lot of these mysteries that we're having because they kind of follow the seasons.
Maybe next month we'll invite Francie to be a special guest, and she can say, I have this on perpetual number. Everybody for being here. See you all next month, hopefully. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.